Okay, so today we're going to be creating sparks in After Effects with no third-party plugins. So, to get things started, I'm going to go up to my project panel and I'm going to create a new composition called Sparks. Make this 1920 by 1080, 10 seconds long, and the background color is going to be black, and then it will click OK. So then I'm going to hit Ctrl Y to create a solid, and we'll call this Particles. Click OK. And then we're going to add an effect to this called CC Particle World. So this is a built-in plugin in After Effects, so I'm just going to drag it onto our solid layer, and you can see it creates this cool like spark fireworks show. So I'm just going to drag this thing down into the corner, so sparks coming from the side of the screen, and then we're going to start working on making this look a bit more like sparks. So the first thing I'm going to do is going to change the particle type to faded sphere. Well, then we'll come back to the particle in a moment, and now we're going to change the physics. So velocity, I want to turn up so they reach the other side of the screen. Gravity, so they fly upwards. We need a bit more velocity, so we're just going to make sure they definitely reach that side of the screen. So we're going to go to the beginning, and there we go. So that way, it will already start with the sparks fully flying around and just chilling. So now that we've got our physics done, we can go back into our particle tab. And I'm just going to change the size to 0.1. And you can see they're still bigger at the end, so you need to change both of them to 0.1. And obviously you can use your own numbers. I'm just picking these ones, so you can do whatever you want. And size variation, let's just turn this down a little bit. We do want a bit of variation so we don't get the same generic particles, but we don't want too much. And then the maximum opacity, let's maybe take this up a bit. We're going to be changing the opacity in a moment. So that's probably enough in CC Particle World. So now what we can do is hit this motion blur switch and this, which enables motion blur on the composition. So now you can see they look more sparky. But we can edit this, and there's probably a bit too many of them, so we'll turn the birth rate down to like 1.1, and we'll also just grab the producer and move it just down a little bit more so they don't look like they're coming straight from like the edge of the screen. And now that looks pretty good, but they're pretty like generically moving. So I'm going to add an effect called Turbulent Displace, and what this will do is it will displace all the particles, but obviously at the moment this is way too much, so we're going to turn the amount down and the size down. Have a look at that. And this just gives you that like sort of wispy movement in the particles. Then we'll alt-click the evolution and type in time times and then probably 100. Now what this will do is it'll take the current time, so the frame you're on, so here we're at 6 frames you can see, and it'll multiply it by 100, and that'll be the value for the evolution. So now you get slightly more cool looking particles. And they also look quite similar, so we can slightly up the complexity to create a more complicated design. We don't want to overdo it, so if we just look at this particle here, we can just take this up a bit, see before and after, and it's giving that a bit more wispy movement, which looks pretty cool. So then I'm just going to add a tint effect to make it black and white, and then I'm going to add curves so that we can colorize this more easily without doing it in Particle World. So I'm going to start off with taking the green. I'm going to pull that down a little bit. Blue, I'm going to pull down even more. Then red, I'm going to push a bit, like that. So that looks pretty cool. So you've got a nice colour there, that's before and after. I want to boost the red a bit more and then maybe a tiny bit more green. And for the lightness wise, we'll just take that down a little bit so they look a bit cooler. So we can close that off now. And now I want to add some glows. So we're actually going to go back into the project panel, and you can see here it's 8 BPC, which is bits per channel. So we're going to click this, drag it over here, and we're going to make sure we've got 32 bits per channel selected, because this will basically just make the glow effect look a lot cooler. So now we're going to add the glow. So here we go. We'll throw this on there. So at the moment this looks pretty pants. So if we turn the threshold down completely, we'll turn the radius up a bit more and the intensity down to like that. That looks pretty cool. Okay, so it's got like a nice little outer glow. I might want to like tighten that just a little bit so you can see before to after. They look a bit more vibrant now. Then I'm going to duplicate that by hitting Control D, and I'm going to turn up the radius a lot more. Maybe turn down the intensity like so. So that gives us like a bigger edge, and then we'll duplicate it one final time for a really big radius, and we'll turn up the threshold a little bit so you just get a little less glow. You can see some of them here look not very good, so maybe we'll take the intensity down to like 0.2 on this one. But that looks pretty good. We'll increase this a bit. Okay, cool. And then, because we've lost some of the colour, I'm just going to take this curves effect, hit Control D, and just drag it under the glow. That hasn't really worked. Won't bother with that. But that looks pretty cool. So if we play this now, you can see we've got some really cool sparks. Say we wanted to add a little more like streakiness to them, we could use CC Force Motion Blur. And this basically is a motion blur effect that adds even more motion blur. So you can change the samples here, so the more motion blur, and you can see it's just adding these little dots and blurring it out a little bit more. But I'm not going to bother with that because it's a really, really slow effect to render. Another thing we might want to do is blur them so they don't look as perfect. We could use perhaps vector blur for that. Obviously this looks a bit weird on the colour, so if we put that before the tint, you can see down here it's really affected some of them, but that just adds a bit of, you know, sort of difference and makes them all seem a bit different, which is pretty cool. We can also go in here and particle, change the size variation a bit more, just so we've got a bit more difference. The opacity map, we can change that if you want, but that'll just make it so they appear in and then fade out. But really, that looks pretty cool. And the best thing about this is it has a transparency. So you can see behind it. You can also take down the opacity by hitting T, and then maybe putting this at 75%. And then you can see we have an opacity behind it. And if you wanted to generate random a new type of particles, you can go into extras, change the random seed, and that will just change what you get, but with still the same settings. So that's helpful if you're rendering out different ones for different scenes and you don't want it to all seem the same, or you can just make a really long one and just go with that. If you want to render it and keep this transparency, you can go into the render queue project. I'll just drag my sparks in here, and the setting you need to go into output module, and you just need to make sure you've got channels RGB plus alpha selected, and that way you'll keep the alpha behind this, so you can just import it on and you don't have to put it in a blending mode. So yeah, that's all for this tutorial. See you next week.